I don't have a tendency to practice compassion on myself. And that's why I thought today I'm going to really drill it into my head. And I want to share with you what's really going on in my heart and in my head. Okay, my screen just disappeared. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I was just curious. Everyone has heard this word compassion, right? If you just give me if you have heard of this word compassion, everyone has, okay. Has anyone ever experienced compassion in your life? Okay. Okay, can I ask just one of you to share what was your experience with compassion? Narada Muni, I saw your hand up. Do you mind if I ask you to share?
Yes, I would say compassion can come in many different forms. One that really touches my heart is when you get compassion from a stranger. So it could be just, you're out and about and you have a small conversation with somebody and they open their heart to you. So I would say just any heart-to-heart connection can be an exchange of compassion.
Okay. Okay, very good. Very good. Uh, Jennifer, would you like to share? Just one more. Just one more. You're on mute, I think.
Here, sorry, I'm sorry. Um, I feel when I have experienced compassion towards another, it's an outpouring of love that I didn't expect. It's sudden, it comes suddenly, kind of by surprise sometimes. Um, and it's a joining, um, uh, a common sense of knowing or togetherness. Like you meet at the same level.
Hmm. Okay, okay, okay. Very nice. Very nice. So, yeah, I want to share with you what's been happening in my heart and my mind. It is this deep emotion of compassion, it is not just an emotion, it is also a deep spiritual principle that is something that we are all hoping that it is something that we can experience, but we are sometimes not ready to give this same emotion and that experience to others. So in yoga, we understand this principle of apathy, that people are so jaded by the material world that they don't even feel much. And when we go into this race of materialism, sometimes the process in itself is so harsh that we become so hard and we become so jaded that we almost don't feel. I remember growing up in India. You may know that India is quite a populated country, and their birth, old age, disease, and death is not something that is hidden like it is in the United States. When people die, they die in a very soft bed, or, well, most of people die, in a soft bed because they're dying in hospice or in the hospitals. But in India, you can see birth, old age, disease, and death out in the open. People are giving birth on the side of the street, people are dying. And so I happened to see something that had left a long impression in my mind, which is uh, someone just getting run over by a car and no one stops to tend to that person. And I remember I asked if I could go and see what's going on and help. And they immediately said, if you go there, the police will think that you're a culprit, and so you may get implicated. And the teacher immediately dragged us out from there. And it was circumstances, but amazing for me to observe in that place was there are people who had observed all of the event that occurred, but people didn't seem to come forward, could not really recognize in their face, that a soul has left the body. And I also think it's because that soul was just homeless, and so people didn't give it much value. So that impression went in my head, that somehow, sometimes it seems like the world is very cruel. So much happens. There are many instances that in my life I've seen apathy towards animals and others. It's hard for me at that time to process how is it possible that people can look at somebody in the eye and hurt them. So this is something I've observed, and then we had to study about this principle of sympathy. We need to have sympathy for everyone, and then we need to have empathy for everyone. But one of the deepest teachings that I have experienced was this compassion. Compassion is not empathy, is not sympathy, but it's something very deep. And that's why I wanted to discuss with all of you. Where is it coming from? Where can it be experienced? What are the degrees of compassion that we can experience? So in yoga, we study that compassion is, in modern day, we study how there is empathy, which is feeling ourselves sympathy, feeling ourselves in the shoes of someone who is suffering. We see it and we feel it, and empathy is really feeling what they're going through at that time and moment. And compassion is really seeing it, feeling it, and experiencing it internally, and actually standing shoulder to shoulder with that person and doing something to take them and free them from that pain. And this is something that yoga emphasizes a lot. Where is this emotion coming from? Where is this drive? What is this courage? Where is this vulnerability coming from? That when someone is suffering, we have compassion for them, just deep-seated compassion. And I remember reading in the dictionary, they define compassion as it's a feeling when confronted with another's suffering, one feels motivated to relieve them of their suffering. So this is how a dictionary defines compassion. But the Vaishnavas or a sage defines compassion as something very, very deep. It is the natural quality of a soul in its pure state. A soul that is pure in its original state is its natural quality and tendency is to have this compassion, because what that person sees is he sees with the eyes of the Divya Chakshu, is called the eyes of the heart, because it requires the heart to move the body and the intellect to do something. If we feel compassion for someone, it's because we saw it and we feel sorry for them and we move on. Yes, it's a resemblance. It's a spark of compassion. And even to take the time to hear them, yes, these are all sparks of compassion. But compassion is an action. Compassion is not an emotion, but it's compounded with an action to do something. And we will see how in our yogic lineage we study about so many sages. I'll just give you a story of one sage. This sage, his name was Vasudeva Dutta, such a great sage. He was a disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in his heart, he just was in constant anxiety and constant despair and constant pain. And so he approached his teacher, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, "My dear Lord, I am in so much pain and suffering. I really would like to uh, do something about this." And then his guru inquired, "What is the cause of your suffering? Why are you feeling this pain?" He said, "Everywhere I look, I see people are chasing after materialism and suffering uh, due to that effort and that momentary pleasures, and I feel that they're just struggling and in so much pain of being lost in the material world, in the jungle of material illusion." And he was literally feeling the suffering and pain of being lost in the material world. And so his teacher said, your heart is pure, and therefore you're able to experience and see all the suffering of the souls being lost and struggling to swim to the shores of happiness, permanent happiness, but they're drowning in this ocean of material suffering. So therefore, please ask me, how can I help you? How can I serve you? He says, "My dear Lord, please bless me that I can take the pain and suffering of all the conditioned souls who are drowning in materialism, and you can take them all, send them all back to the spiritual world, which is their original home." So the teacher said, okay. The teacher had the power to take the suffering of everyone and free everyone. But then he explains that, but I cannot, as a teacher, I cannot watch you suffer, just as you cannot watch them suffer, and I send them all back to the spiritual world, but then you're still here, so I want to also make sure that you are freed. So this is the heart of a teacher, to take the suffering and pain of others, including those that take the suffering and pain of others. So this was one example. And there are one more story I'll share with you. This is a story of another sage. His name is Dadichi. Dadichi was a sage who spent his whole life in the mountains doing meditation for years, and his whole life was completely spent in deep immersive meditation. He was such deeply in meditation that every single fiber in his body was vibrating with powerful spiritual consciousness, that his bones, even the bones, the marrows in his bones, are all vibrating with uh, powerful spiritual vibrations. So much so, at that time, there was a war that was going on between the demigods and the demons. There's always global interplanetary wars that happen between good and evil, just like even in this world we can see. So Indra, who happens to be the king of the demigods, they were on the losing side of the battle, and they needed some strength, they needed some powers. So he personally went to the mountains and to the cottage of this great sage, Dadichi, and he approached him. He says, "My dear sage, please help us." And there's a beautiful dialogue that takes place between King Indra, king of the heavenly regions, and this great sage, Dadichi. And this Dadichi explains to him that I have been practicing my whole life to elevate my consciousness to the highest possible level. And part of practicing spiritual consciousness, lifting one's spiritual consciousness, is there is an automatic practice of compassion. And so in my heart, I feel your pain. Just by you sitting in front of me, I feel the anguish, the pain you're going through. So please tell me, how can I be of service to you? And this great king, completely, weak due to his uh, ill habits, this king approached this sage by asking him, can we please have your corpse? Imagine. Can you die so we can have all your bones in your body? And upon the request of this great king, the sage was so happy. I don't know, would anyone be happy if someone just asks you to die? I remember when someone asked me when I was young, we would like, I wish you would just die. And I said, no, I wish you would just die, So little kids, you should die first. No, you should die first. But this sage was so eager to be of service because his whole life was cultivating this consciousness of complete immersive divine consciousness, so immersed that this body meant so little in its spiritual value, but the moment someone asks for his material possession, he was ready to give it without any hesitation. And this is how this compassion comes from. It's very deep. Anyone asks us for a piece of hardware, because of our attachment, depending on our attachment, we may decide whether to get rid of the hardware, to let it go or not. Hardware meaning the material body, right? It's a hardware, and the intelligence, our software. Mind, intelligence, and the ego. And the soul is the user. So from that perspective, he is so happy that, okay, this machine, please take it. This machine doesn't belong to me. I mean, look at his consciousness. The consciousness of someone who is practicing the deepest level of compassion. He is completely detached from his gross body, from his subtle body, and he's completely situated in his pure consciousness. That is the depth of compassion that we're seeing in this great sage. He has no hesitation. He says, my dear king, anyone who does not live life with this utter detachment of the material aspect of our being, then they may be missing the point. And so therefore, I do not want to miss this great opportunity to allow you to have this body. And he immediately took his breath and he let the king have his physical remains so they could turn that into a weapon, because his whole body was so powerful due to his austerities and penances. That was then used to defeat the demons. So the interesting lesson that I remember from that pastime was this great king Indra, he felt deprived. And so he was operating on the material platform of material conditioning of passion, of materialism. Materialism is primarily in the mode of passion. So when there is passion in your life as the dominant force, then compassion goes into hiding. So please keep this in mind. when there is dominant emotion in your life of the mode of passion, then compassion goes into hiding. But a sage, he never feels deprived, and because he's so spiritually situated, he has nothing but compassion for those who are in any kind of difficulty. He feels that they're spiritually deprived, not materially deprived. So materialism means that we are materially deprived, and that's why compassion is missing. And a sage is noticing that because we are materially deprived, spiritually deprived, so he has compassion. He has nothing but pure compassion because materialism is not something that they attach themselves to. So this sage, Dadichi, I'm not sure if I made that point clear because Balaram, did I make sense? I think that one seemed I was going around in circles.
Which point? About passion and compassion?
Yes, yes. Can you reiterate to see if I made any sense?
Yeah, we're just juggling mics over here. Yeah, I thought it was a nice quote. You said when passion comes into your life, that compassion goes into hiding. Because passion is materialism. So the heart feels compassion for anyone in any kind of difficulty. But when we're thinking of enjoyment, then it covers over the heart and then we can't feel for people.
Okay, perfect. I think you did a better job than I did, so thank you.
Just repeating.
Thank you, thank you. So this compassion is literally coming from our heart in its connection to the divine heart. When our consciousness is connected to the divine consciousness, then this flow of compassion is flowing. If you look at the teachings of Prabhupada, one of the teachers, he explains that even Jesus Christ, if you look at his life, he practiced this compassion. He was ready to take the suffering of everyone. And he still felt for the people, even his own tormentors. So this is what we're talking about, compassion. Someone who's always situated in the heart. Because mind cannot have genuine compassion. The intelligence cannot have genuine compassion. Genuine compassion is only accessible when our consciousness is connected to the divine consciousness. Because compassion is spiritually empowering someone. If you look at someone you share compassion with, what are you giving them? You are genuinely giving them spiritual hope. You're giving them God's love. You're showing them who they truly are. So this is what spiritual compassion is. It is the empowerment of the soul that resides within another body. Letting them really, really see their true hidden spiritual light that is dormant, that is waiting for someone to spark it. Everyone has it in them, and everyone is seeking compassion. Everyone has compassion to give, but it requires someone whose consciousness is already connected to the supreme consciousness to go light the flames of compassion in the hearts of others. And this is why a sage, it explains in the yoga text that their duty, their dharma is simply to go and light the spark of compassion in the heart of everyone. And the more we light the spark, the more sparks we light in the hearts of everyone, the more we become qualified children of God, the more we become qualified beneficiaries of God's grace. And this is why compassion is a natural tendency, the natural quality of the soul in its pure state. It is simply because of the coverings of material illusion, of material passion, that we lose sight of this beautiful light of compassion in our heart. So the sages always recommend that once we cultivate this compassion in our heart, it is not something that just, it'll just show up whenever you want. It actually has to be cultivated. And the way we cultivate compassion in our heart is by the daily practice of our sadhana. Every day, in our retreat, we discussed this a little bit, that every day when we sit with our box, our heart, the Bhakti Essential Box, what are we doing? What we're doing is we are actually practicing compassion. How is that practicing compassion? We are teaching ourselves the importance of giving ourselves, our spiritual selves, the time and the nourishment that it needs to stay connected to the self. And from that connection to ourself, then we are able to have that divine connection with God. And once that is there, then everything we do in our lives becomes successful. It is only through the eyes of compassion that we can find happiness and joy in this world. It is only through compassionate dealings that we can actually experience genuine relationships, genuine love in each other's dealings. So compassion is the glue that binds us to each other. Compassion is the glue that connects us to the divine. Compassion is the nectar that makes us feel whole. And so therefore, compassion is so heavily emphasized by the sages. Sometimes you will notice that compassion is in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Sometimes we feel compassion when someone just needs some food, and we just have some compassion for the body, and we have compassion for the external coverings. But the real compassion is very, very deep. This real compassion is not about the body, it's not just about the mind, but it's about the soul within the body as well. And you will notice when you practice this every single day, your vibration will be so high that even the animals will come close to you. There is a very beautiful story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This great sage, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's walking barefoot from west of India to the north of India. Sorry, east to the north, yes. And he was walking through a great dense forest called Jharikanda forest. And that forest was known to be heavily infested with the most wild of all animals. So tigers, lions, that it was known that anyone that walked through that jungle never came back. No one ever heard from them. But when he was going to Vrindavan, he went through that Jharikanda forest. But because he had such deep love and compassion for all living beings, it explains that even the frequency, his spiritual energy was so high, even the animals were accompanying him with affection and dancing with him, raising their arms in compassion and dancing with him on his journey from east to the north. And sometimes it's difficult to understand this. How is this possible? But just think about simple people that we even know in our lives, how their compassion is so deep that it touches people's lives from all over the world. They feel the vibration and they rush to go meet such saintly people. I mean, Jesus was what, 2,000 years ago? All around 2,000 years ago? Not too far. Vasudeva Dutta, Haridas Thakur, these sages were only 550 years ago. They walked this life of compassion. Such is the power of compassion that it is considered that compassion, to be in compassion with oneself and others, is considered to be spiritual ecstasy. If you really want to know what ecstasy is, then practice compassion 24 hours, which means that your mood is continuously thinking about how to serve others' hearts. And that is spiritual ecstasy. Not just serving your heart, but you're serving your heart by serving the hearts of others and truly nourishing them. And this is spiritual ecstasy. And that is also possible for all of us to experience, that spiritual ecstasy. So this was my rambling for today. I was just thinking how I had thrown one of my lower back discs off, and I was just being not very kind to the body. And so I realized how compassion has to go, not just, it should be holistic. Our body, our mind, and the soul, they all need to experience compassion. Sometimes we'll be very harsh on our bodies because we're like, no, we're just, spiritual, just we'll do hard stuff. No. It's not just hard stuff. It's hard deep, but it does not mean that we should not pay attention to the needs of the body and the mind. So this is what my thoughts are for this topic of compassion, my rambling for this Saturday. Any questions or comments or thoughts? Balaram, yes.
Thank you for the thank you for the class. I wanted to ask about false compassion. I think all of us will be familiar with that feeling. You gave a couple weeks ago the example of, in America, so common, people ask, "How are you?" and they don't want to know. And it's so common, people will say, "Oh, so sorry for you," or, "Oh, it's terrible that happened to you. Can we get on with our meeting?" And that's one topic, but my question is actually something I've noticed in myself, that sometimes I become more interested in the false compassion than real compassion. That I just want the display. I don't actually care if people feel it. It's like, just give me we crave the comfort. We crave the display of affection, whether or not the person actually feels it, because we're so hungry for real compassion that we just accept that that's all that there is. And so, every now and then I throw my tantrum and people treat me nicely for that week. And I know I can only use it so often, because if you throw a tantrum too often, then you're like the boy who cries wolf and people stop listening to you. So you only get so many, but you can use that, but it doesn't really satisfy.
Now you can pay for your compassion. You can pay the therapist and they can give you compassion. It's only $200 an hour to experience compassion. Yes, very good realization, Balram. Very good realization. You know, I often think about this, that true compassion, we have to ourselves cultivate our sadhana so deeply. You know, our bhakti kriya that we have to practice it with such sincerity that we really, really connect with ourselves. That spiritual practice that you all have, it's a mechanism, it's a spiritual practice, a kriya that gives you such deep connection to yourself that you will remain in spiritual ecstasy, Balram. You will not need some validation from anybody for any emotions. There is no tantrums needed, because you will see the tantrum before it's coming, and you will already be feeling that love, that you will not need to throw a tantrum. And most people in this world, they do throw a tantrum for that reason, because they want some compassion. They want to experience that love. And because we cannot experience it, then we try to buy that with money, by shopping and so many other ways, you know. Buying gifts is one of the biggest ways people try to experience. It's a subtle form, but it's not real compassion. Poor me, I'm just gonna go shopping. Nobody likes me, I'm just gonna go shopping. It doesn't serve the deeper purpose. So in spiritual life, because compassion is a spiritual attribute, you cannot use material tools to access this spiritual emotion. It requires a spiritual practice, and that is why we have our sadhana practice every morning, to access this powerful spiritual fragrance of the heart. So I don't think you had a question, because I like your point more than your question, or maybe you had a question and I didn't let you finish. But I thought it was a good realization you shared, how we're all seeking compassion, and all we get is something else, superficial validation. And it doesn't fill the heart, because the heart needs compassion. Heart wants to be understood. The heart wants to feel that connection. The heart wants to be loved. And that's what compassion is. Compassion is an expression of deep love from the heart. And how can we give compassion to others if we do not have deep love in our heart? And how can we experience love in our heart if we don't invest time in our heart every single morning with our sadhana? So this is why the sages are saying, hey Baba, take some time. Take some time to really see the treasure that you have inside. So what was your question, Balram, since I took off from your
I
share?
think you're right. It was maybe just a point, and I guess noticing that in myself, that the question was about, the realization was that I realized that I sometimes want the display more than the actual compassion, but how is it that we miss that, or are we really we're so desperate? I don't know what is my question.
That's perfect. I don't know what my answer is. Anyone else would like to share anything, add anything?
I do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please, I yield.
We're gonna do this all day. Um, I feel you, Balaram, because I've had these same experiences. So my question is, as you were talking, I kind of formed it, that sometimes when I'm in a circumstance where I'm telling the truth about whatever's happening to me. And the person that is receiving that is intending on being compassionate, and I can feel their heart. And by experiencing this, I've also investigated how I behave in this manner at times, where they're not practicing compassion. And I really like what you were saying earlier in the talk about that there's these layers, these there's the sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Connie and I have had lots of Hari Priya and I have had lots of talks about this. And what I've found that I'm feeling coming off of them is projection. I'll tell them something like, for instance, when my partner passed away, the people would be like, oh, you must be feeling angry. You must be feeling this. You must be feeling that. And I'd say, no, that isn't what I'm feeling. Please don't tell me how I'm feeling. I'm trying to express this to you. And so my question is, how, because I'm like, well, now I do feel angry because how can I transmute this into a gentle response to them, or a response that doesn't turn into aversion, because then I just don't want to talk about it, because I don't feel communication, and so then maybe in the past instances where maybe I do want to have someone hold space for me and I'm averse to wanting to share because I feel like maybe that person might project what they would feel in that circumstance onto me, rather than just hold space and just resonate with the circumstance that I'm sharing. Does that make sense as a question?
Beautiful, beautiful. My simple suggestion, it's not an advice. My simple suggestion is, the best communication sometimes is no communication. So if someone is projecting something, it's okay. It's their projection of whatever they feel. There's no need for a response. I feel like many times when people come to me, Veda, I need you to give me a solution. I need your advice. And I said, sure. So I sit there and I listen to them. And there was no need for an advice. They just needed to tell me their story. And all I had to do was sit and listen to their story. And that was it. They have the solutions. So I feel a lot of the times as we practice compassion, you will start to become a little bit more silent because you'll become an observer. So active practice of compassion means looking at the world with the eyes of the heart, and you'll have nothing but pure love and compassion for them, and you'll realize that there's no need to engage in a mental or an intellectual duel with anybody. And you'll be able to remain calm and peaceful. So I always recommend this as a tool, because if we look at everyone in this world with the eyes of the heart, which is divine eyes, it's called Divya Chakshu. And then you'll know exactly what to do. You'll know exactly what to do. It is when we look at every situation, every dealings with our mind and our intelligence and our senses, then we have to calculate. What should I say, what I shouldn't say, and maybe I should say this, and maybe this is not the right time. All this complex calculation comes in when we're not looking at the situation with the eyes of the heart. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question or not. Maybe Lisa has the answer for us. Lisa, please share.
Well, you're doing such a wonderful job, and I think it's an awesome question. You said earlier that compassion is when someone is centered in the heart, and it so resembles charity because the act of compassion and love is seeing the divine in another individual and calling it forth and holding space for that sacred dance to occur. So Tanya, which is also my sister's name, I so appreciate the question. It just allows us to be compassionate to receive the gift that people are trying to give. And if I have a range of emotions from which to choose, compassion is a great one. It's a great choice.
I've learned to be gentler, and just say, I hadn't thought about feeling that way. When they're projecting to me in the past, becoming very angry, you're not doing what I want you to do, which is hold space for me. And then maybe it's not about aversion. It's about, do I even really need to talk about it? Because I already know how I feel, having compassion for myself enough to just take the time to find safety in my solitude. Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you.
So our time is up. I'm so grateful to all of you. Keshavi or Nitai or Balram, any of you have any announcements or housekeeping or anything? Laura, nice to see you. Welcome home. Any announcements, Nitai, Balram, Keshavi?
I think India is you have to register by this week. Is that right?
They closed the doors, but we can still knock on the doors.
Data extended it a week.
Nitai asking me to share the Labor Day retreat here in Atlanta is September 1st, at the end of this month. We'll be with Veda in North Georgia mountains, beautiful place up by a nice waterfall, and have kirtan and big retreat. So he's just shared the link here. I think signups are open, another 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So yes.
A lot going on. Yes, so thank you all so much, and please take yourself more seriously today and meditate on this principle of compassion for the self and compassion for others. Yes, and India doors are closing because Tara Prabhu, he has to book the internal flights within India and also the hotels, because we're going at quite a busy time. So if you're joining us, please contact him. Please just message him and he will work with you. So thank you all so much. Namaste, beautiful souls. And I look forward to seeing you next Saturday.